Week 8 of the fantasy football season, and here's top 15 tight ends I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Travis Kelce, he's been playing on another level over the last few weeks. I don't know if it's Taylor Swift or him and Mahomes are locked in even more, but anyway, he's been putting up monster games. He's had 2 games over the last few weeks where he's had 100 yards or plus at halftime. So this week he in a good matchup at the Denver Broncos. I think Kelce once again has a big game. He's number 1. Number 2, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So Mark Andrews, he's been a solid tight end for many seasons with this Raven team. I know he got off to a slow start so far this season, but last week he got back on track with 2 touchdowns. And him and Lamar, they just got to get back to basics. We know Andrews, he can make all the plays, he can run all the routes, and he's a big threat in the middle of the field, and a player as well who gets yards after catch. This week, indoor game in Arizona, fast track, and one of the worst defenses in the league. I think Mark Andrews has a big game as well. He's number 2. Number 3, TJ Hawkinson of the Minnesota Vikings. So TJ Hawkinson, he's been solid since he got traded to Minnesota last season from the Detroit Lions. And Hawkinson, he's a big threat in the red zone. And he's another tight end as well that can run a lot of routes, and a guy after yards after catch can make some big plays with some good speed. So this week here at the Green Bay Packers, a team he's very familiar with, playing in the division his whole career. I don't think the Packers really have an answer here for Hawkinson, and I see him once again with a great performance at number 3. Number 4, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Evan Ingram, he's been a vocal point of this offense. Him, Travis Etienne, and Christian Kirk with Calvin Ridley over the last few weeks looking like he's been the odd man out a little bit. So this week here, tougher matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know they got a very solid defense, but right now, Trevor Lawrence, he relies on Evan Ingram as a security blanket and a guy he counts on week in and week out. And this week, in a tougher matchup, like I said, at Pittsburgh, where it's always a grind-out game with the Steelers, no matter who it is, I think Ingram put in a decent performance this week. And like I said, he's one of the most targeted tight ends in the league. And him and Trevor Lawrence have been on the same page for a while now. Number 5, Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions. So Sam Laporta has been a perfect fill-in for TJ Hawkinson after drafting him this season. And Laporta is another tight end. He can run the deep route. He's a big threat in this offense behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this week versus a weak-rated defense that don't really stop anyone, I think Sam Laporta in this one has a bounce-back game. I know the last few weeks, numbers have been down a little bit. Last week, they just got the doors blown off, ran into a buzzsaw at Baltimore where they couldn't really get a rhythm with this Lion team. And I know a few weeks ago as well, he really didn't do much in that ball game. But this week here, Monday Night Football, extra day's rest versus a weak-rated defense. I got him at 5. Number 6, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. He's had 3 good games and 4 bad games this season as Kittle. And this week here, a good matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals, where we know their defense is a bend but don't break type of defense, but you could pass on them and you can make plays. So Kittle coming off for 78 yards in that Monday Night Football loss in Week 7 at Minnesota. So Deebo Samuel, once again, I don't think he's going to play in this one. Brandon Ayuk had an all-right ball game, but right now Kittle, he's a matchup problem still for linebackers and safeties. And he's a big play tight end. Last season we saw it towards the end of the season. And we've seen flashes this season. He had a 3-touchdown game versus the Cowboys a few weeks ago, and versus the Giants he had 90 yards. And then in Minnesota, like I said, in Week 7, 78 yards. So this week versus Cincinnati, I think Kittle has a good game at 6. Number 7, Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Goddard's starting to get things going now the last 3 weeks here, where it was looking like he was an odd man out in that offense, where it was all A.J. Brown, DeAndre Swift, and Devonta Smith. But Goddard, the last few weeks, he's had big games. A couple weeks ago at the Rams, he had over 100 yards, a touchdown. And then last week in Week 7 versus the Dolphins, he had 77 yards and a touchdown in this game. So this week here, the weak Washington Commander defense in a game with a potential shootout between these division rivals. I think Goddard has a good game once again at 7. Number 8, Darren Waller of the New York Giants. Darren Waller, if it was Tyrod Taylor starting this game, I think he would have moved him up a few slots, but we don't know for sure who's going to start at quarterback. Obviously, if Daniel Jones is healthy and ready to go, they're not going to sit a $40 million quarterback on the benches, this Giant team. So Darren Waller, he was the big offseason acquisition for the Giants. He's had some decent games and some games where he's been pedestrian and has disappeared. This week, definitely a tough matchup in the battle in New York versus the Jets, one of the better D-lines in the league. But I think Darren Waller is a matchup problem for most players at linebacker and safety. And this week, if Taylor's starting, I think he has a good game. If Daniel Jones is starting, it's a 50-50 toss-up. But anyway, I got him at 8. Number 9, Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. So Dalton Schultz, the last few weeks, him and CJ Stroud have been on the same page. He's found the end zone the last 2 games of Schultz. And we saw last season he had a great year with the Dallas Cowboys. And right now with CJ Stroud targeting him more and Schultz being a solid route runner and a sneaky quick type of tight end, I think this week in a good matchup at the Panthers that really haven't stopped anyone this season, I got him at 9. Number 10, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. So Kyle Pitts, early in the season, he wasn't doing much, but the last few weeks he's emerged. I know last week he didn't really do much, but it was just a weird game with the Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where it was a grinded out, but Pitts had a huge catch down the sidelines where he almost broke one to the house in that to put the Falcons in field goal position, and they won the game. So this week they're at the Tennessee Titans, a team you could pass on. I know Desmond Ridder, one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, but for one thing, he is getting the tight ends the ball, and Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith. And this week I got Pitts at 10. Number 11, Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders. So this season's been a bounce back here for Thomas. I know a lot of injuries the last few seasons. I know the quarterback carousel as well over there in Washington. But right now it looks like Sam Howell is the guy, even though he definitely struggled big time at the New York Giants. But Logan Thomas still had a decent game. He's a big tight end, threat 6'6", 6'7" in the red zone. We saw a few seasons ago he was a top 10 tight end in fantasy points. And this week here in a game where they're going to be chasing points most likely early and often is this Commander team. I think Thomas has a good game once again and is a decent option at 11. Number 12, Jonnu Smith of the Atlanta Falcons. So Pitts and Smith, the only 2 tight ends really in the league here that got fantasy value on the same team. So Jonnu Smith, he came back down to earth last week in that game with only scoring 5 fantasy points at Tampa Bay. But this week here versus one of his former teams, the Tennessee Titans, I think Jonnu Smith could go in there, have a decent game. We know he's a good route runner, and we know Desmond Ridder targets the tight ends a lot. Jonnu, Kyle Pitts, they get a lot of targets, and he's more of a short thrower and underneath thrower. So this week here, former team, Tennessee Titans for Jonnu Smith, a team that isn't good against the pass but good against the run. And I think Jonnu's decent at 12-13. Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints. At Taysom Hill the last few weeks have been back in this offense for this New Orleans Saints. What Taysom Hill's about, he can run the football, short yardage, goal line packages, but now he's lining up as a tight end, and he's actually been catching the football over the last few weeks as well. So this week he in a potential shootout at the Indianapolis Colts, and this New Orleans Saints team need a little bit of a spark after losing the last 2 weeks in a row here. I think Taysom Hill could have a good ball game. We know he's a gadget guy in this offense. They use him different packages. And like I said, he's expanded to catching the football as well the last few weeks. But right now, you just don't know what you're going to get from him for sure. So I got him at 13-14, Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. So Dalton Kincaid, he emerged last week with his best game of his NFL career here in his rookie season. 8 catches, 75 yards, and Dawson Knox most likely out in this one. So Tampa Bay, they're middle of the pack defense. I know they got some pretty solid linebackers on the team, but when you got a quarterback like Josh Allen and a talented tight end like Dalton Kincaid, who was a first-round pick for a reason, they're going to use him a lot. And this could possibly be the start of a breakout and a guy could help fantasy owners down the line here. So this week here, Thursday Night Football, potential shootout, and Knox most likely out. I got him at 14, and the 15th and final tight end I'm ranking is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. So Ferguson, the first month of the season, he was very solid and a top 10 option in fantasy points. But right now, the last few weeks, he fizzled out for this Cowboy team. And now they had the bye week. And I think they get him back in the game plan in this one. I'm not saying Ferguson's going to go out there and have a huge game, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if we see something like 5 catches, 40 yards, which is decent in PPR leagues because we know tight end is one of the weaker positions. So right now, Dak Prescott always targeted the tight end, where it's Jason Witt and Dalton Schultz the last few seasons, and now Jake Ferguson. And this week here, in a grinded-out type of game with the Cowboys and the Rams, I think it's going to be. I got him at 15, so that's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking here for Week 8.